references to love and follow the idol, there is further. And we emphasize because of these references, try our best to act as if every night there is further. The result was out, especially the last 10 nights. Because as well as Rasulullah used to put the most effort in Ramadan, but in the last 10 nights, he put for the last 10 days, he put even more effort in Ramadan. And we didn't get any questions in the week, so we'll continue inshallah, but here we have to about 10 days and 8 days.
What 10 days and 8 days?
And what about the income? They will speak about the income in the book. They will come to that, but now we're speaking about, let's say we'll move from speaking about Ramadan and fasting specifically into speaking about
Fasting in general. Right? But he continues to speak about Ramadan first. And the virtue of doing good acts in Ramadan. So he says, وينبغي الإكثار من الصدقة والمواساة والتعهد للفقراء والمساكين وتفقد الأرامل والأيتام في هذا الشهر الشريف. That from the good that you can do with this month is sadaqah. And you can do sadaqah any time of the year. But like we emphasized before, the amount of reward that is doubled in this month. Right? So it says from the good that you should increase in doing is sadaqah, to the poor, to those that are in need, right? Taking care of orphans, right? Because Rasulullah ﷺ said, فَقَدْ وَرَدَ أنه كان عليه الصلاة والسلام أجود بالخير من الريح المرسلة وأنه أجود ما يكون في رمضان. Emphasize that Rasulullah ﷺ used to always give, used to always be generous, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And it says at the end of the hadith, وَأَنَّهُ أَجْوَدُ مَا يَكُونُ فِي رَمَضَانِ. That however generous you thought or you saw Rasulullah outside of Ramadan, you used to be even more generous inside of Ramadan. So if you, for example, you have a cup, some people they have a cup in the car and they put all the change in there. Everybody you outside, you give them a 2 rand, say for example. Now in Ramadan, give them a 5 rand, you can give them a 10 rand. Right? You put that extra effort in because you get the extra reward. So صدقة وينبغي الإكثار فيه من تلاوة القرآن ومدارسته ومن الاعتكاف في المساجد ولا سيما في العشر الأواخر إذ كان عليه الصلاة والسلام يعتكفها. Firstly, he says that in this month you increase in reciting the Quran, right? But you don't say recite the Quran like you just read through the Quran, right? You recite the Quran with tadabbur, with contemplation, with tafakkur, with pondering about it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ أَمْ عَلَى قُلُوبٍ أَقْفَالُهَا. Do you not ponder about what is said in the Quran? Right? Or do you have locks over your heart? Because we have many people that just read the Quran, but they don't understand what they are reading. And sometimes you don't need to understand. It's good to learn Arabic to understand the Quran, but when we say the lower level of reading is read with your heart. You don't just Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Maliki yawmiddin. You read with tajweed and you read not with your tongue, but you read with your heart. Because the heart understands all languages. The heart understands even silence. And then when you go a level higher, you try and find yourself. That's why it says, وَمُدَارَسَتِهِ. Not only just going out and teaching the Quran, but you try to find a class in which they are teaching about the Quran. You find a class, a tafsir class for example, and then you attend those classes, especially in Ramadan, to learn more about the Quran so that your yearning can increase for the Quran. Like we said, we mentioned in one of the classes before about one of the scholars from Tarim who, because of the sweetness that he tasted when he recited the Quran, he said that he didn't want to recite in the day. Because when he recited the Quran, he tasted honey. So he used to delay his recitation, he used to do his other ibadat in the day, but at night he used to recite Quran. Because he was scared he was going to break his fast, because when he recited the Quran, he tasted honey. And the same Sheikh, when he used to stand in Salah and recite the Quran, and he came to the ayah, إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات سيجعل لهم الرحمن ودا. That those that believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and do good actions, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make him beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And because of the yearning and the love and the effect that this ayah had over his heart, he ended up repeating not the ayah, but the last part of the ayah almost the whole night. So he said, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ سَيَجْعَلُ لَهُ الرَّحْمَنُ وُدًّا. سَيَجْعَلُ لَهُمُ الرَّحْمَنُ وُدًّا. Then he ended up saying wudda, wudda, wudda all night. Right? Because he never read the Quran with his tongue. He read the Quran with his heart. And i'tikaf. I'tikaf, specifically in Ramadan and in general. Right? When you come into the masjid, and it's important that we understand, every time you come into the masjid, then make the intention for i'tikaf. Say, now wait till i'tikaf lillahi ta'ala. Because when you come into the masjid and you make that intention, then as long as you are in the masjid, you get the reward of i'tikaf. Right? So every time you come in the masjid, you make the niyyah. You would find that in Tarim, in many of the masajid, you find the intention for i'tikaf written on the pillars. So when you come in, you're reminded to make the intention. And then specifically in Ramadan, and specifically in the last 10 nights, because Rasulullah used to do i'tikaf in the last 10 nights of Ramadan. And it's advised that while you're doing i'tikaf, right, in those last 10 nights, what they normally do, like here in Cape Town, is that they don't just make it you stay inside the masjid for yourself. There's normally groups stay inside the masjid and they have classes, right? I didn't know about last year or before, but because I haven't done i'tikaf at this masjid before. But normally at the masajid, then they have the scholars and they come, there will be a class in the morning, for example, a tafsir class in the morning after Fajr. Then after Dhuhr there's another class. After Asr there's another class. After Isha, after Tarawih, after everything, when the people leave, everybody leaves, then they have another class. Right? To bring it alive so that people don't just come and make salah, they can actually learn and understand about salah. Because every time, for example, in the morning tafsir, after Dhuhr fiqh, after Asr aqidah, and at night tazkiyah, like that. Right? So he says that, why? Especially in the last 10 nights. Why? Because Rasulullah used to do i'tikaf in the masjid, specifically in Ramadan, the last 10 nights. ثُمَّ اعلم أن شهر رمضان شهر مبارك على المسلمين. So, after everything that you've heard in the past 3 weeks, this is the 4th week, right? Understand that this month of Ramadan is a blessed month for the Muslims. وفي اليوم السابع عشر منه كانت وقعة بدر وهو يوم الفرقان يوم التقى الجمعان. That understand that from the occurrences that happened in this month is what? The Battle of Badr, which happened when? On the 16th. Right? سابع عشر. وهو يوم الفرقان يوم التقى الجمعان. Right? وفي رمضان كان فتح مكة. And in Ramadan was, we all know what Fathu Makkah is. Right? With Makkah, when they won over Makkah. وَدُخُولُ النَّاسِ فِي دِينِ اللَّهِ أَفْوَاجًا. Right? Because when Makkah became open, the Muslimin, then what happened? Then people started entering Islam. Afwaja. Afwaj is, what is that? The waves in the ocean. Right? So much people start entering into Islam after Fathu Makkah. وَفِي لَيْلَةُ الْقَدْرِ. And we spoke about Laylatul Qadr. التي هي خير من ألف شهر. That is greater than 1,000 months. ومن أدركها وعمل فيها بطاعة الله 12 سنة مثلا. And somebody that gets to experience, so somebody that reaches the night of Laylatul Qadr and he worships Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his actions are only that which gains him closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He does ta'ah for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Example, say for example 12 years. Example, كان بمثابة من عاش في طاعة الله 1000 سنة. Then it would be the same as somebody who lived his whole life obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for 1,000 years. Right? فَهَلْ شَيْءٌ أَعْظَمْ مِنْ ذَلِكَ وَأَجَلُّ قَدْرًا. So do you find anything better than this? After hearing about, listening to the virtues and the benefits of Ramadan, right? Would it be logical of you to waste your time in Ramadan? Would it make sense for you to busy yourself with anything with anything besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Ramadan? وَكَمْ فِي رَمَضَانِ مِنَ الْبَرَكَاتِ وَالْخَيْرَاتِ. And how much good and blessings you find in Ramadan. فَتُوبَى لِمَنْ عَرَفَ قَدْرًا. So glad tidings to the one who understands the virtue and who understands the greatness and the virtue of this month. وَاغْتَنَمَ أَوْقَاتَهُ وَسَاعَاتَهُ. And he takes advantage of his time in this month. وَاسْتَغْرَقَ لَيَالَهُ وَأَيَّامَهُ بِفِعْلِ مَا يُقَرِّبُهُ مِنْ رَبِّهِ. And he immerses himself in the nights of this month. In the nights of Ramadan, he immerses himself by doing anything and everything that brings him closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like we mentioned, that it's Saturday or Sunday, right? Ramadan is Saturday or Sunday? First Tarawih is Saturday. Saturday. Like we mentioned, that Saturday night, what you do is you walk to the end of the cliff. You walk to the end of the hill. What cliff is this? You walk to the end of the cliff of yourself. The cliff of your nafs. And you walk to the end of this cliff and you jump into the ocean of obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And once you find yourself in this ocean, you immerse yourself in this ocean. And you start floating until you find and taste the sweetness of this month. La ilaha illallah. It's fine. La ilaha illallah. وَذَلِكَ فَضْلُ اللَّهِ يُؤْتِيهِ مَنْ يَشَاءُ. And this is from the favors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives to whom He wishes. وَاللَّهُ ذُو الْفَضْلِ الْعَظِيمِ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who gives the best and greatest of favors. وَعَلَمَ أَنَّ أَفْضَلُ الصِّيَامِ صِيَامُ شَهْرِ رَمَضَانِ. So understand that the best of fasting is the fasting in the month of Ramadan. وَكَذَلِكَ يَكُونُ الْأَمْرُ فِي جَمِيعِ الْفَرَائِضِ. And this is the same with every other obligatory action, every other mandatory action. It's the same, right? It's better and the rewards are greater in the month of Ramadan. أعني أنها تكون أفضل من الفرائض التي من جنسها بشيء كثير. لقوله عليه الصلاة والسلام عن الله تعالى. Because Rasulullah ﷺ told us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ما تقرب المتقربون إلي بمثل أداء ما افترضته عليهم. That nobody comes close to me except through doing what I have made compulsory upon them. Right? That which I have made compulsory upon them is the first step for them in gaining my closeness. وَلَا يَزَالُ الْعَبْدُ يَتَقَرَّبُ إِلَيَّ بِالنَّوَافِلِ حَتَّى أُحِبَّهُ. And after you do what is compulsory upon you, your faraid, and then you continue working upon gaining the closeness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by doing nawafil, until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves you. Until you change from the state of being the one that loves to becoming the beloved. Right? And this is clear that even if you're doing nawafil your whole life but you don't do faraid, you will get nowhere. Right? Because the point is to first do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made compulsory upon you until you move yourself from the concept of taklif, where it's a burden, and it becomes tashrif, where it's an honor for you. You don't do it because I have to do it. Because then your nafs start whispering that no, I have to do it, but I still do it when you're lazy. But if you do it changes from taklif to tashrif, and becomes an honor, you do it because you want to do it. You do it out of yearning to gain the closeness. You do it because you taste the sweetness in the salah, and because of that sweetness that you only taste in salah, you can't wait for the next salah. ثم صوم الأشهر الحرم وهي أربع. And after the month of Ramadan, the best fasting after the month of Ramadan is what? Fasting in the 4 sacred months, which is Dhul Qa'dah, Dhul Hijjah, Muharram, and Rajab. Right? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, إِنَّ عِدَّةَ الشُّهُورِ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ 12 شهرا في كتاب الله يوم خلق السماوات والأرض منها أربعة حرم. That from the time that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created creation, there has been 12 months. And from these 12 months, there are 4 that are sacred months. وقد ورد, and it's been mentioned, أن صوم يوم من الأشهر الحرم يعدل صيام 30 يوما من غيرها. That fasting in one day of the 4 sacred months is equal to fasting 3 days in any of the other months. وصيام يوم من رمضان يعدل صيام 30 يوما من الأشهر الحرم. So what do we say? That fasting one day in one of the 4 sacred months, right? Which is Dhul Qa'dah, Dhul Hijjah, Muharram, and Rajab. Fasting one day in one of these months is equal to fasting 3 days in any of the other months. And fasting one day in the month of Ramadan is equal to 30 days of fasting in one of the 4 sacred months. Which would mean that is equal to if you say 30, one day in Ramadan is 30 days of the sacred months. And one day of the sacred months is equal to 3 days. Alright, so 30 multiplied by 3. Right? And you can calculate that and you find why we say, and you understand why we say that any good action in Ramadan is better than the action outside of Ramadan. And like we said, we spoke about before about the amount of reward you get for making a fard salah in Ramadan. And then making a sunnah salah in Ramadan is equal to the reward of a fard salah outside of Ramadan. وورد, and it's also mentioned أن من صام 3 أيام متتابعة من شهر من الحرم الخميس والجمعة والسبت باعده الله من النار. That whoever fasts 3 days continuously in one of the sacred months, a Thursday, a Friday, and a Saturday, باعده الله من النار. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will distance him from the hellfire. And so he says Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, right? Friday fasting alone is what? Can you fast Friday alone? No, it's makruh, right? You have to. Because Rasulullah said so. So it's makruh, right? You have to, if you want to fast on the Friday, you have to join it either with the Thursday or you join to the Saturday. Yeah, this hadith is mentioned that whoever fasts 3 days continuously, and it's mentioned here, the Thursday, the Friday, and the Saturday, 3 days in one of the sacred months, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will distance him from the hellfire. وَمِنَ السُنَّةِ, and from the sunnah, صِيَامْ سِتٌّ مِّن شَوَّالَ عَلَى أَثَرِ رَمَضَانِ, fasting the 6 days of Ramadan, right? The 6 days of Shawwal after Ramadan. توديعا له وجبرا للخلل إن عرض فيه للصائم. Firstly, to say goodbye, right? توديعا for Ramadan. And secondly, why? جبر للخلل إن عرض فيه للصائم. So if you made a mistake or you had shortcomings in the month of Ramadan while you were fasting, you fast that 6 days as a protection, right? Because what happens, for example, when I cut myself, right, I can just clean it off. But why do I put a plaster on? So that germs, so that doesn't get worse because of germs, or so just in case it starts bleeding so it doesn't mess, right? Just in case. so I do that extra, right? So it says why? Because an-nawafil jawabirul faraid. And it's a common principle that jawabir, that nawafil, right? That voluntary actions are a protection for the shortcomings or the mistakes found in mandatory actions, in fard actions. What do we mean by this? That, for example, if I make salah, why do you make sunnah salahs afterwards? Right? Understanding this principle. That you make a fard salah, but you make sunnah salah afterwards. That sunnah salah that you make is a protection for you because you might have made a mistake in your salah. You might have had shortcomings in your salah. Right? Sadaqah. Right? If you had shortcomings in giving out your zakah, then you make sadaqah. So, nawafil is a protection for the shortcomings or the mistakes that you make in your mandatory obligations. Right? So that's why we fast the 6 days of Shawwal, after Ramadan. Because you might have made a mistake in our fasting, shortcomings, unknowingly. So just in case, we fast that extra 6 days. For that extra protection, put the bandage over the wound. Just in case, otherwise if we don't put the bandage over, right, and it starts getting infected, and what happens? You get sick, right? So just in case, we put that bandage over and we fast a bit extra, right?
Just on this check, they say if you fast 6 days of Shawwal, and yes, if you fast
The whole year. ومن الفضائل وقال عليه الصلاة والسلام من صام رمضان ثم أتبعه 6 من شوال فكأنما صام الدهر كله. That whoever fasts the month of Ramadan, whoever fasts the month of Ramadan and the 6 days of Shawwal, both, right? It's as if he has fasted the whole year. ومن الفضائل صوم يوم عرفة. From the virtuous time to fast is when? The day of Arafah. وهو يوم الحج, the time when the people go on Hajj. التاسع من ذي الحجة, the 9th of ذي الحجة. وقد ورد أن صومه يكفر سنتين. That the person that fasts on the day of Arafah, as mentioned, that he will be forgiven for 2 years. يكفر, whoever fasts on that day, يكفر سنتين, is forgiven for 2 years. قال العلماء, and the scholars have mentioned, وهو أفضل يوم يصام في السنة بعد رمضان. And the scholars mentioned that the best day to fast outside of Ramadan is when? Day of Arafah. ولا يستحب للحاجة يصومه لأجل القوة على الدعاء في الموقف والقيام بالمناسك. So it's not sunnah, it's not allowed for the person that is on Hajj to fast on the day of Arafah. Why? Because he's going to be weak, right? So he has to be able to do the manasik, the ibadah that's supposed to be doing. وصوم يوم عاشوراء, and fasting on the day of Ashura. وهو العاشر من المحرم وقد ورد أن صومه يكفر سنة. The 10th of Muharram, يوم عاشوراء, sunnah to fast, and it's mentioned that fasting on the day of Ashura forgives 1 year. The day of Arafah, 2 years. The day of Ashura, 1 year. ومن المتأكد المستحب من الصيام صيام 3 أيام من كل شهر. Right? Fasting 3 days in every month. Right? Sunnah. وقد وردت الأحاديث الكثيرة بأنها تعدل صيام الدهر. And there are many ahadith that mention that fasting 3 days in every month is equal to fasting the whole year. وإن تحرى بها الصائم الأيام البيض كان أفضل وأحسن. And if you specifically choose to fast these 3 days when? On the Yamul Bid. Right? لأنه ورد عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أنه كان لا يترك صيام الأيام البيض في حضر ولا سفر. وهي 13 والرابع والخامس عشر من الشهر. It's meaning that Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم every month he used to fast on these 3 days. He never used to leave fasting on these 3 days, whether he was traveling or not traveling صلى الله عليه وسلم. And these days were when? The 13th, the 14th and the 15th of every month. Right? Sunnah is called Ayyamul Bid. وإن صام هذه الثلاثة من غير البيض فلا بأس. And even if you fast 3 days in the month and it's not a Yamul Bid, that's fine. Right? But specifically, if you want to, it would be advised that you choose those 3 days. إلا أنها أولى. Right? It's recommended that you choose those 3 days. وكذلك إذا صام هذه الثلاثة مفرقة. And it doesn't mean that you have to fast all 3 days continuously. Right? You can fast day by day. ولا ينبغي للمتنسك أن يترك صيام هذه الثلاث من كل شهر فإنه صوم خفيف المؤونة عظيم الفضيلة وحسبك من فضل أنه يعدل صيام الدهر. Right? المتنسك, somebody that's on Hajj or Umrah or doing Ibadah, right? You should also, somebody that loves doing Ibadah, this person should not be of those who leave this type of fasting. Because it's easy, it's only 3 days in a month. The rest of the month you can eat. Only 3 days. Right? And the virtue of these 3 days is immense. Fast 3 days in every month, you get the reward of fasting a whole year. وَحَسْبُكَ مِنْ فَضْلِ أَنَّهُ يَعْدِلْ صِيَامُ الدَّهْرِ. And it's enough for you to know that the virtue of fasting these 3 days of every month is that it's equal to fasting the whole year. وقد أوصى به عليه الصلاة والسلام جماعة من أصحابه رضي الله عنهم, that Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم advised from his companions to fast 3 days, especially Ayyamul Bid. Like we said, that you can fast any 3 days in the month, right? But specifically because Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم fasted on the white days. That's Ayyamul Bid, right? The 13th, the 14th and the 15th. You fast in those months, in those 3 days specifically. But if you want to fast any other 3 days, it's fine, right? Is the reward still the same? Now, you get the reward for fasting the whole year, and you get the reward of following the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because you used to fast on those 3 days. وقال عليه الصلاة والسلام, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that صوم نوح الدهر, that Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam used to fast the whole year. صام نوح الدهر وصام داود نصف الدهر كان يصوم يوما ويفطر يوما. And Sayyidina Dawood alayhi salam used to fast half of the year. What do you mean half of the year? He used to fast one day and not fast the next day, and fast the next day and not fast the other day. وصام إبراهيم الدهر وأفطر الدهر كان يصوم ثلاثة من كل شهر. And then Sayyidina Ibrahim, he used to fast for a year and not fast for a year. What do we mean? That says كان يصوم ثلاثة من كل شهر. What do you mean he fasted for a year and didn't fast for another year? Rasulullah said that he used to fast for 3 days in every month. Salawatullahi alayhim ajma'in. Qultu, and Haddad says, وَأَفْضَلُ الصِّيَامِ صِيَامِ دَاوُدَ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامِ. And you mentioned this, that the best of fasting is the fasting of Sayyidina Dawood alayhi salam. The most beloved fasting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the fasting of Sayyidina Dawood. He used to fast one day and not fast the next. For example, you fast Monday, you don't fast Tuesday. Fast Wednesday, you don't fast Thursday. Right? Like that. وهو أن يصوم يوما ويفطر يوما وأفضل من صيام الدهر كما ورد في الأحاديث الصحيحة. And it's better than fasting the whole year. Because if you fast the whole year and you're fasting every day, when we say fasting, we mean fasting like we spoke about, like we mentioned. You're not fasting, then at night you eat the whole buffet. It's almost like you never fasted. You eat so much that the next day you don't feel like you're fasting. We say fasting with the etiquettes of fasting that we mentioned previously. Right? Because if you fast that way, then what's going to happen if you fast every single day for a whole year? You become weak. Right? You lose fat. You become skinny. قال Imam Ghazali mentions وهو آني صوم داود عليه السلام, that he says that the fasting of Sayyidina Dawood عليه السلام أبلغ في رياضة النفس وأقوى في مجاهدتها من صوم الدهر. That fasting the month of Ramadan is better for It's better for your body, right? Because you know, people that go on a diet or people that gym, what do? They fast, right? Even Christians, they fast, right? As part of a diet. When you exercise, you fast. So it says that fasting this way, fasting one day, the fasting of Sayyidina Dawood, fast one day, don't fast the next day, is better for your health, right? وَأَقْوَى مِن مُجَاهَدَتِهَا مِن صِيَامِ الدَّهْرِ. And it's better to strive upon fasting one day and not fasting the next than fasting consistently for the whole year. Because you will be more consistent in doing that than fasting the whole year, right? وفي صيام الاثنين والخميس من الأسبوع فضل كثير. And in fasting when? Monday and Thursday. There's also immense virtue in this. كان عليه الصلاة والسلام يصومهما ويقول هما يومان تعرض فيهما الأعمال على الله. Rasulullah ﷺ used to say that these are 2 days in which our actions are raised to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فأحب أن يعرض عملي وأنا صائم. And I would love for my actions to be raised to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and I am fasting, right? So we have a Monday and a Thursday. Rasulullah ﷺ, he also fasted on a Monday because he was born, right? Or was the Thursday? But Rasulullah ﷺ, he said that he fasted. Why? Because that was a way that he celebrated his birth. He used to fast. But we're not going to go into that now. Celebrating is allowed. وصيام يوم الجمعة محبوب لفضله وشرفه. And fasting on the day of Jumu'ah is also loved. Many of the awliya and the scholars used to fast on the day of Jumu'ah, right? لكن مع الخميس أو السبت. Like we said, you enjoy it with the Thursday or the Saturday. You can't fast it لأنه ورد في إفراده بالصوم نهي عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. Because Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم, it's mentioned in a hadith that Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم told us not to fast on a Friday, right? Because you can look at it from this view that the Friday is known as what? The Eid of the week. It's known as the Eid of the week. And fasting on the day of Eid is haram, right? We know this, that after Ramadan, somebody, mashallah, they're on top, feel very pious, say, I want to fast on Eid. It's haram, right? It's haram to fast on Eid because the day of celebration. وعليك بالإكثار من الصوم مطلقا فإنه من أبلغ الأشياء في رياضة النفس وكسر الشهوة واستنارة القلب وترقيقه. That in general, try to fast more, right? It's good for you to try to fast more in general because it's better for your health and it's good to fight your nafs. Like we mentioned before, that why it's so easy to do good in Ramadan, because everybody knows shaitan is shackled, right? But when you're hungry and thirsty, then your nafs is weak. He has no control. You can't say anything, right? So when you're fasting, you have more control over your desires. And someone that fasts continuously also, it brightens and fills his heart with nur. And it softens his heart also. Because a believer should not have a hard heart, right? It's mentioned in a poem. It's a poem about fiqh, but he says in the muqaddimah of this poem, وَأَبْعَدُ النَّاسِ مِنَ الرَّبِّ الرَّحِيمِ قَلْبٌ قَاسِي. That those who are the furthest from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are those that have a hard heart. Who are those that have hard hearts? When they listen to lectures, they don't become affected. When they listen to the Quran, they don't become affected. When they listen to praises of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they don't become affected. And you can say that how do I become affected if I don't know Arabic? Like I said, you're listening with your ears. If you listen with your heart that understands every language, your heart that understands even silence, right? If you listen with your heart, then you will become affected. There's a story of Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani. He had a son. His son's name was Muhammad. And Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani, whenever he used to talk, and everybody used to cry. Everybody used to cry after his talks. And his son thought that I can also do this. So his son went to his father and he said, I want to speak the next time. And his son was a faqih, he was a muhaddith, he was a proper scholar. And so he went and he got his talk, organized everything. The next day he came and he spoke. And they said, everybody listened to his talk and he said, MashaAllah. They listened and said, MashaAllah, he spoke nice. Then Shaykh Abdul Qadir went up and he spoke. After Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani spoke, everybody was crying. Everybody was in tears. Some people started fainting. And then, you know what's the story that Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani said? He said that one day I went to the souk. I went to the shopping place. And I bought a chicken. And the people started crying. And he said that I took the chicken home and I cooked the chicken and I put it by my window. And when I came, and then once I put it by the window and I looked away, a cat came and stole my chicken. And the people started crying. People started fainting. Right? People became affected by that. And when they asked people afterwards, everybody said that, no, we understood this and we understood this and we understood that. Why? Because Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani spoke with his heart and they listened with their hearts. Right? But if somebody speaking with their tongue, the one giving the talk is speaking with their tongue, and you listening with your ears, then they won't give out anything beneficial and you will not benefit. Right? Where did that come from? We were speaking about softening your hearts. And that fasting helps you soften your heart. Right? La ilaha illallah. And then the rest of this we were going to continue speaking about in the last class to finish it off. Right? So, as from what we've heard of Ramadan, right, we understand that there's more or less 10 days left till Ramadan. Right? What is today? Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Say it was the first hour, it could be Saturday night. Right? So, we should ask ourselves, are we prepared for the month of Ramadan? Right? A month of patience, a month of virtue, a month in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will gaze upon His slaves on that first night. And are we ready for that gaze? Because if we are people that still have animosity in our hearts, then we won't gain that gaze. Right? Because specifically here in Cape Town we say anger issues. Right? We get very angry very quickly. And Rasulullah he said in the hadith, somebody comes to you and he tries to attack you, he agitates you, starts speaking bad about you. What do we normally do? Either you smack him, either you start talking back, either you start saying something worse. Rasulullah he said that if somebody comes, you say to yourself and you tell him in your soil that I'm fasting, I want nothing to do with this, I'll just stay away from this. But you start now. If you want to make the best of Ramadan, you start now. You go to your bed and you say that now, before I go to sleep, I forgive every single person that harmed me and said anything bad to me, whether they did it knowingly, unknowingly, in public or in secret. There was a man that Rasulullah he was sitting in a gathering with the Sahaba, and Rasulullah he said that a man will come in now and he's from the people of Jannah. And all the Sahaba waiting, the man came in and he sat down. The next day Rasulullah he said the same thing. And the same man came in and he sat down. And the next day Rasulullah said the same thing. And the same man came in and he sat down. And the Sahaba were perplexed, they were shocked. Who is this man and what's he doing that Rasulullah said 3 days in a row that he's from the people of Jannah. So one of the companions went to him and he made a story. He said that I have problems at home, can I sleep by you? So this man said, yes, you can. And he stayed over and he saw that this man, he was not fasting in the morning. He would wake up after Fajr, he would eat. At night, he wasn't making extra salah. He wasn't doing anything that you would say this person is from the people of Jannah. And he went and he told his man, see, I didn't see you do anything, but we heard Rasulullah say that he's from the people of Jannah. So he said that I do not do anything extra except that every night before I go to sleep, I forgive every single person that wronged me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَلْيَعْفُوا وَلْيَصْفَحُوا أَلَا تُحِبُّونَ أَن يَغْفِرَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ. So forgive, right? Forgive and pardon, because you not want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive and pardon you. Imagine you say, no, Allah is going to forgive me, but you can't forgive His creation. I'll give an example. And this example we made here in the masjid long time ago. So I don't know if you still remember it. We said that if you built a car out of scratch, you built a car out of scratch, everything, right? You did yourself. And somebody comes to you, somebody comes to that car. This person that comes to the car, before he used to borrow money from you and used to give, right? But now this person comes to you and he starts throwing bricks in your car. And he completely destroys your car, right? We go further, we say throw a bomb in your car, right? Completely destroy. And if he comes to you and he asks you for money again, realistically speaking, are you going to give him money? Huh? Or we don't say realistically speaking, we say speaking to Cape Townians, are you going to give him money? Huh? Or are you going to give him a 5 rand even? You're going to give him nothing, you're not going to give him a 50 cents. Right? So, imagine you saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to forgive me, but you don't want to forgive His creation. Right? People can change. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can change somebody just like this. That same day that he did wrong to you, an hour later Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have changed his heart. And he can be a better person. And now that person changed and he becomes somebody that's close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He might not just change, he might become a wali. And you still dislike him and you have animosity towards him. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Man aada li waliyan faqad adhantuhu bil harb. That whoever makes an enemy of one of my awliya, then I wage war against him. So, imagine that person, you don't know what happened afterwards. He could have become a better person, could have become closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than you, and you still dislike him. Now he changes so much that he becomes a wali, and becomes close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now you dislike him because of your dislike to him, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wages war upon you, and what happens if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wages war upon you? No barakah, no good, nothing. Everything you do means nothing. That's why the most important thing we understand from this hadith is what? Is something we call mafhum mukhalafa. Mafhum mukhalafa is that we always understand the opposite of something. So if it is man aada li waliyan faqad adhantuhu bil harb, then you understand man wala li waliyan faqad adhantuhu bil hub. That whoever becomes close and becomes a friend of one of the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then they will become beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because you love someone that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. And the reality of this is that you do not know who is a wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? You won't know. You can't tell. You might see somebody a certain way outside, but you don't know what's in his heart. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never allowed you or gave you the power to check somebody's heart, so you cannot know who is a wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You might see this person, the adhan for dhuhr is going, and he's driving past the masjid. Right? You say, who is this guy? Huh? You don't like him. He already, in the past 10 years ago, he said something bad about you. You still don't like him. Now nafs tell you to speak more bad about him because you saw him driving past the masjid when the adhan's going off. Now that person could make salah at home, right? But he's making salah at home with his family. So he's also getting the reward of Salatul Jama'ah. And you could just come and make your fard salah and leave. He's there, he made sunnah before dhuhr, he made sunnah after dhuhr, and he made more sunnahs. But because you think bad of this person, that could be a wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and because of that, all the good is removed from your life. And like we said it again, we'll say it again, that you do not know who is a wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So because you do not know who is a wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, does that not mean that you should act with every single person as if they are a wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And you could say, that's it. It's difficult because I might say the words out, I might say I forgive him, but my nafs won't allow me to forgive him. And we say to you that say it with your tongue, and then you say that, oh Allah, you are a witness that I have forgiven him with my tongue, so aid me in forgiving him with my heart. Aid me so that strengthen me so that I have the capability to forgive him with my heart. Right? And once you say that sincerely, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will allow you to forgive with your heart. But you start by forgiving with your tongue. Right? What time is it, Shah? 48. You start by forgiving with your tongue. Right? So, the first step, if you want to take advantage of Ramadan, make the best of Ramadan, forgive. Right? And everybody that's sitting here and that's listening, make the intention that before you make Isha Salah now, after the Adhan, before you make Isha Salah now, that you have forgiven anybody that wronged you. Knowingly, unknowingly. In public or in person. Doesn't matter what they did. You forgive them. And you have patience upon them. Right? If they come to you and they speak to you, you interact with them as if they did nothing wrong to you. Because you have patience. And like we mentioned before, that the reward of patience is what? Jannah. Right? So, we'll end off with a story about one of the Habaib in Tarim, one of the scholars in Tarim. Once somebody came to him, he walked outside of the masjid, and somebody came to him and they started speaking bad about him and started cursing him. Right? I think some mentioned that they hit him. Right? And then afterwards they left, or they started speaking bad about him. Then afterwards he left and he went home. Right? And he started crying. And they asked him, why are you crying? He said, because I only forgave him once I got home. How I wish I forgave him as soon as he said those bad things. Once the same thing happened, and he said that I forgave him when he started talking to me, when he started saying those bad things. What do? You say something bad, you pick up the cup and you want to hit him with it. You say something bad and you say something worse back. We also have to change our states, to change it for the better.
What happens if you ask somebody now and that particular person don't want to accept your mom?
Don't want to accept the mom. So, we have certain things that you have to ask the person for forgiveness for it to be forgiven. Like riba, backbiting. You spoke bad about somebody, if you want to be forgiven for that, you have to go and ask that person for maaf. You have to go and apologize to that person. Unless you know that if you go and tell that person or apologize to that person, that is going to cause a fitna. If you know that it's going to cause a fitna, then no. You don't go and you just leave it and you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive you. That's if you're certain it will cause a fitna. Right? If the person doesn't want to forgive you, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that you are sincere in asking forgiveness, and you actually change, because remember, we said tawbah has conditions. That seeking forgiveness has conditions. First, an-nadam. You have to feel remorse. Then, al-adam alla ya'ud ila mithli. You have to be determined to not return back to that action. And what's the last one? Is to say it. Right? To make tawbah. You can do it in any language. And in the example that you always mention, that even if you go back to the sin, make tawbah again. Because like a what? a cup of Coke. That if you take a cup filled with Coke and you keep filling it with clean water, the cup's going to start overflowing until all the Coke runs out and the only thing that is left is the water. The cup is your heart, the Coke is your sins, and the water is the nur and the forgiveness that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you. And once your heart is filled with this forgiveness and this nur, then all the sins will start, then your heart becomes full and the sins start to flow out until there's nothing left but a pure heart. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to purify our hearts. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from us and to bless us in these last few days of Sha'ban so that we can enter Ramadan with a pure heart, so that we can gain the gaze of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the first night of Ramadan. And like we said, that even before anybody move from the seats, forgive every single person that wronged you. Again, whether they did it in front of you or behind your back, whether they did it in public or in secret, whether they did it by mistake or on purpose. Because always remember the ayah. Like we should contemplate, ponder about the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلْيَعْفُوا وَلْيَصْفَحُوا أَلَا تُحِبُّونَ أَن يَغْفِرَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ. So forgive and pardon, because you do not want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive you. We understand from this that if you are not forgiving, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not forgive you. And these aren't my words, it's the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he says that Ar-Rahimuna yarhamuhum ar-Rahman subhanahu wa ta'ala, that the most merciful is merciful with those who are merciful. In another hadith Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, Man la yarham la yurham, that the one who is not merciful, mercy will not be given to him. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who are merciful and patient, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from us. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam, walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.